Hey guys. Hey. Welcome to the first episode of E-Diary. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. For today's episode, I thought like a fun, interesting and very fitting topic. We would discuss the phenomenon of cringe. Cringe is everywhere. Cringe is in all our memories, all old social media posts, in trying new things. Cringe is a very unavoidable, natural human feeling. So I thought I would conduct some very slight research. Like, this is not... Hold on, I have hair on my leg. This is very low effort research. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I'm not a research expert either. But I thought it would be useful to kind of run through what cringe is, why it happens, where it comes from, and why it may be holding us back more than we realize. From this research, I would say I found that cringe isn't something to avoid, rather to understand. And I think kind of befriending cringe and understanding it can help you navigate it a little bit better, because it's something that we can't control. As we've already said, it's something that is everybody experiences. We all experience it. Some of us experience it very differently. I'd say I am more susceptible to cringe than maybe a lot of people, and I don't know why. But anyway, let's start with the definition of cringe. Okay, we all kind of know what cringe is. However, I think it's important to have a starting point. And I looked through a lot of different definitions. The definition that I am using is just a standard Oxford definition. To have an inward feeling of acute embarrassment or awkwardness. That's very basic. I don't like that definition, okay? I was thinking of ways to kind of redefine cringe, because that is not how it feels. Okay, guys, I just googled the definition of acute because I thought surely I'm getting that wrong, and I in fact was. So it is defined as severe but of short duration. That makes so much more sense. I do agree with the definition of cringe. Completely ignore everything else that I say in this part, but I'm not editing it out because we all make mistakes. So, sorry. Cringe does not feel acute. Like, cringe is very much like, I mean, for me, it might be so different for somebody else, but for me, and I feel like for a lot of people, there's levels to it, right? So sure, you can have that acute awkwardness feeling, but you can also have that really intense, like, psychological and sometimes physical withdrawal. Like, I don't think that is acute. So that definition I'm not too thrilled with. However, we'll roll with it. It makes sense. And I feel like through a lot of definitions, embarrassment and awkwardness is kind of a central theme. But again, like, cringe and awkwardness and embarrassment are very different. And I think it's more powerful than just embarrassment or awkwardness. That being said, they're definitely in the same realm. But yeah, anyway. Moving on, I wanted to understand the difference between cringing at others and cringing at ourselves, because, again, very different experiences. So, from my research, I have found cringing at others is often linked to secondhand embarrassment and empathy of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and understanding the consequences of their actions, which is oftentimes potential social rejection. And that is basically why we cringe at others, which makes sense, because I think cringing at others is relatively harmless. Like, we all cringe at our parents, right? Like, at some point, like, even still, I'm 21, like, sometimes my parents will do things that I'm like, they make me cringe, and it's not from a place of, like, malice, or I don't know, I'm not judging my parents, but it's almost like I feel sorry for them. Like, oh, I don't know how to describe it, but you know what I mean, right? Cringing at others is oftentimes harmless, and it doesn't stick with us like cringing at ourselves does. I've just realised my camera's crooked, but we'll have to make do with that. It's the first episode, so just bear with me. So, cringing at others, it's harmless. However, I think with social media, and definitely for younger people who don't know what to do with their emotions a lot of the times and their feelings, I think that cringe at others can oftentimes be projected onto them, whereas I think it's okay to keep that to yourself. I think that is not a harmful thing to keep to yourself. If you are cringing at something somebody's doing and they seem to be okay with it, like they're fine with it, they're having fun with it, whatever, it's not harmful to them, it's not harmful to other people, keep it to yourself. Like, that is a healthy thing to keep to yourself and hold it in, because it's not going to stay with you, right? I mean, it might. There's some scenarios I'm sure that it might, like, especially if it's someone you love, like I said, parents, maybe like a cringy moment that they have might stick with you a little bit, but in the long run, it's not going to harm you to hold that in. Or, if it's necessary, have a conversation about it, but don't, project that sort of embarrassment that you are feeling onto them. And then it's very harmless. However, people don't do that a lot. Moving on to why we cringe at ourselves, because this oftentimes hits a little bit harder than cringing at others. And it's very interesting what I found. And it sounds kind of like common sense, right? But I think, again, just researching something is so helpful to understanding it. And so I found, now this is from mind.org, which I don't know how reliable mind.org is. Okay, so mind.org says, the negative emotions we experience in response to a cringe behaviour arguably includes guilt and shame. Shame is universal. The only people who don't experience shame have no capacity for human empathy. That was not included in the article, but I kind of included that because, like, we all experience shame, right? And I think shame is such a useful thing to experience, again, because it helps us reflect on maybe moments where we feel shame for our bad behavior, and we can learn from that and change and grow. So shame is not necessarily always a horrible thing. It's very useful. It's very horrible to experience, but anyway, at this point, it's important to mention that guilt and shame are so-called self-conscious emotions. From that, shame comes into the equation, which I think makes more sense. I think makes more sense than awkwardness or embarrassment, because, like I say, cringe is way more paralyzing than awkwardness or embarrassment. We can kind of get over awkwardness, we can kind of get over embarrassment, whereas I feel like cringe is a lot harder to kind of get through. Like, it really limits us in so many ways, like starting something new, trying hard, like somewhere along the way, those things became cringe, right? Like, being passionate about things is now kind of deemed as cringe, especially in online spaces. But yeah, here we are. Anyway, like I say, we all experience shame in some capacity. Is that an awful thing? No. If we didn't experience it, I'm sure we would have very different outcomes for potential wrongdoings. Some people don't feel shame. Some people don't feel shame, and some people are truly shameless. And again, that's so beneficial in so many ways, but also, like, do those people truly learn and change when they have something to be shameful about? If they don't feel that shame, what's the point in doing things differently moving forward? Anyway, benefits of cringe. I think it's very important to note the benefits, because cringe is not always an awful thing. Cringe is so fun, right? If you have fun with it, and if you understand it. So I listed cringe humor. I love cringe humor. I think I'd say, like, in my personal life, I am very much known, on not known, but just like I enjoy leaning into cringe humor and awkward humor. I don't know why it's so thrilling. It draws my attention a lot of the time. A lot of the content or entertainers that I enjoy very much have an element of like cringe humor or comedy in there. I also noted that it can build social awareness, kind of like how we touched on. Cringe can also build social awareness and help us reflect on behavior. Also touched on that already. But yeah, it's important to touch on it again because those are the benefits. There's a lot to learn from cringeworthy experiences. Moving on, kind of in the same realm, I researched the importance of cringe. I got this from an article by Sam Wolfe, Woolfe, The Autonomy of Cringe. So she says, cringe is likely an ancient emotion akin to embarrassment and shame. This is useful for making sure we adhere to social norms and avoid the pain and, in our evolutionary past, potential death that comes from social rejection. I feel like every emotion and feeling we experience is very much, in some way, a survival mechanism, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense. That feeling of embarrassment and shame is protecting us in a sense. Our brains experience that to protect us from social rejection and, well, potential death in our evolutionary years, according to Sam Wolfe. But why has it then shifted to effort? Now, my hypothesis, if you will, is the reason why trying hard and trying something new and putting effort into things has become cringe from that article is maybe it's linked to the risk of trying new things, because it is risky to put yourself out there or put effort into something that maybe won't work out, or maybe it's not worth putting the effort into. There's risks involved in that. And I wonder if that risk element has something to do with our bodies responding with that cringe feeling. I don't know if any of this is making sense, okay? It's making sense to me, but I just thought I'd put that out there. But like I say, like trying hard and caring deeply about things and being passionate is now cringe, and that somewhere along the way that has shifted and holds us back in so many ways, because that fear of being cringe or being perceived as cringe, I think a lot of it has to do with how we want to be perceived, right? We all kind of have some idea in our head of how we'd like people to perceive us, and we exhibit this through social media and the way we curate our social media to come across as a specific vibe or a specific person who maybe is close to who we are as a person, but not necessarily who we really are as a person. Because it's hard to be vulnerable. It is so hard to be vulnerable, especially online. Social media is not necessarily always the most positive space for individuality, because it's oftentimes met with backlash and shaming and judgmental takes and views on who you are as a person, when these people don't really know you, but you're just trying to, you're being authentic, you're being real online. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. But then again, it all leads back to the fact that it's cringe until it works. Like, you look at some of the most successful people and creative people in the world, and oftentimes their starting point was probably a little bit cringy. It was probably uncomfortable. People may have passed judgment, but ultimately it's not cringy anymore because they fucking did it and they made it. So anyway, I think there's also something to be said for the fact that there's a lot of growth in awkwardness. I'm a social work student, so one thing that is really emphasized or that I've definitely learned, is that awkwardness is inevitable. And I mean, you either lean into that awkwardness and learn from it and progress, or you kind of just let the awkwardness consume you, and you're not going to get anywhere by doing that. I think the absence of awkwardness and cringe oftentimes means you're staying small and you're not growing and changing and evolving. So, I think a good way to close out this episode is by asking yourself and myself, I'm asking myself this, and you also have to ask yourself this: is cringe protecting you or is it limiting you? My answer is both. There's a natural element of my brain protecting me from social rejection, and that makes sense, and I get that, and it's very much a real thing, and nobody wants to experience that. So I'd say for me, it's protecting me, but I think more so it's limiting me, and has been for all of my teenage life and honestly a lot of my early adulthood. So yeah, I'd love to hear about your perspective on cringe and your relationship with it, whether you think it's protecting you, whether you think it's limiting you. But ultimately, I don't think it's a sign that you should stop. I think it's a sign that you're growing, and it's unavoidable. It's completely unavoidable. So, I mean, you either let it hold you back or you embrace it and you let it pass through you. That's kind of all I have on that topic. This has been a riveting first episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got something from it, because I definitely got something from conducting that research. I think, like I said earlier, it's one of those things that when we experience it, we can't control it. We can't control when we're going to experience it, how we experience it, to what degree that looks like. But I think having just a basic understanding of why our body responds like this is quite useful to navigating it and working with it. And I don't know, I think moving forward, what I'd like to do is kind of have more moments with myself where I feel that cringy feeling and I ask myself that same question of, is this protecting me or is this limiting me? And it doesn't mean the feeling's going to go away, but maybe it could influence how you respond in that moment. Whether you go forward with that cringy, awkward social interaction that you've been dreading to have, or maybe you start that new project that maybe you're kind of putting off because you think it's going to be like weird and people are going to perceive it as like dumb. That I'm just describing how I feel about things in my life. This is very much tailored around me, but surely you guys can also see some of this within yourselves, unless I'm alone in this, which I very much doubt I am. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. New episodes every Sunday. Usually I hope that they're probably a little bit more exciting than this. I thought this would just be a nice sort of relevant topic, since this is a new endeavor for me, and it, you know, for a long time maybe I was held back from doing this because cringe got in the way. Cringe and shame and awkwardness got involved. But here we are. I bit the bullet and I didn't let cringe win. So hopefully you tune in every Sunday. Let's hang out. I hope you guys have a great week. And yeah, talk to you next week. Follow me on Instagram, eDiary Podcast. Okay. Bye. Mwah.